Our guests on the World Cafe today are the latest incarnation of The Cure with Robert Smith. The band recently released 413 Dream, an album of new songs, and today we'll hear both new music and classics from a band that has many over their 13 studio albums since 1979. I had a chance after the show to sit down with Robert Smith, still in his trademark eye makeup, to talk about the band he has led since 1979, a band that has inspired fans and musicians alike. I started out by asking, because The Cure is so identified with Robert Smith, with ever-shifting lineups, if he ever considered dropping the name and just making Robert Smith music.
I thought that after the last album, and the reason why the last album was called The Cure in 2004, everyone involved knew that was it. And as it turned out, it was it for two of them. But I really went into that project thinking this is the definitive Cure album. It's everything I've worked towards, and after this I go and do something else. But as it turned out, I had long talks with Simon and Jason. Like, we did a thing as a three-piece, and then Paul, who's my brother-in-law, who I see all the time, just mentioned after a glass of beer, like, maybe you'd like to, get me back in, like. And that's how, it happened. It was the first rehearsal we had as a four-piece was just so good. We played for about 6 hours, and it's like, when that happens, you think, well, maybe it's not time to give up yet. I mean, I've had some awful kind of moments in the last couple of years of thinking, well, maybe it is time that we stopped, But when we come and do this, when we play in front of people, and the reaction's like it is, I have to think that there's still something there. There is no point in giving up. I can't see a very long future for The Cure, I must admit. I'm not being dramatic, but I'm 50 next year, and we're doing a 30th anniversary DVD, and I really feel I want it to kind of like blossom into like the big end. It'll be a really good feeling. So I don't have these dreams of like continuing on for another 10 years. I would be actually quite horrified if we were sitting in this room in 10 years' time. I think that this is a really natural kind of closing the circle sort of end for the band. But within the band, we sort of feel that we're going places. Tonight we were saying it's like the last time we play Philadelphia. It's like yesterday, the last time we played Washington. We're going on stage with that kind of mentality, and I think it shows in the way that we play.
When you look at the history of the band, I'm going to say this in a strange way, but it seems almost as if The Cure has been timeless. There are songs you do tonight that fit in with what's happening musically now. There are things in the 80s that obviously, you did things differently, obviously. I mean, this is a slightly different band. But the Cure is of a whole. And so what you're saying is it's interesting to kind of do closure on the whole.
It's funny the way we ended with the oldest songs that we play. We kind of did that on purpose tonight, because we're aware of like the legacy that we have, and like the way that other bands pick up on what we've done, and it's really flattering actually when bands recognise what we've done. They cite us as an influence. We feel like we're part of this, a very long chain that stretches right back to like the 60s for me. So I've been inspired, in inverted commas, by various artists, and I've wanted to do what I do because of various artists. So I think for us to acknowledge that, to go on stage and play some of those really old songs, for me as the singer, it's actually quite weird thinking back to there's a couple of songs I think like I was so unhappy when I was young. Much more desolate than I am now, which is either I'm losing my mind or I'm being dulled, I don't know. But
what changed in your life?
Well,
you grew up.
I don't think I have, in a funny way. I'm the only one in the band without children, and I'm the only one in my extended family. I have 27 nephews and nieces, so it's a very fertile group of people. But we decided, me and my wife Mary, not to have children for it, primarily because it was hard to justify for the two of us. We didn't really want things to change. I've never felt paternal. I feel very uncle, but I don't feel very dad. It's I like teaching kids to spit, and I hate saying no. So I'm not the best dad. I think it's it kind of translates into what we're doing now. Is that I push this lot into being the band they are. I think they would agree with that because I'm still kind of up for it. It's quite, I don't know. It's funny, but not funny.
You talk about bands who cite The Cure as influence. Of course, Interpol comes to mind, and there is. Whenever you hear that, if they're bands you don't know, do you check them out, and do you understand what they mean when you hear them? Do you hear the influence?
I think with the Curiosa tour 4 years ago, I made a very conscious effort to understand what we meant in modern music. I kind of went out and I met people and talked to people. Before then, I'd probably just been a bit glib, or maybe just not uncaring really about what we meant. It didn't really matter. It doesn't really matter, I suppose. I mean, the reason why I do things with The Cure is not to do with inspiring other people. It's more to do with inspiring myself. If anything else happens, it's always been like it doesn't really. It doesn't validate what we do, but it makes it so much better when people kind of respond to it. But I think you have to believe in what you do and think perhaps that if everyone hates it, it doesn't matter. Otherwise, that's the idea of being an artist for me. This is I've had some long arguments about this, but I'm inclined to believe that we inspire other groups, like younger groups, through how we do what we do, rather than actually how we sound. I think the best inspiration, the bands that I like, the younger bands, are inspired by the idea that you can be a successful group on your own terms, which is essentially what The Cure has done. Through the years, we've been played on radio, we've played stadiums and stuff, but we've never really been perceived as a band that you kind of take home to your mum. We're like with a weird band that hides behind the tree outside the front door. So which I enjoy. I like being like the outsider band. I think it's good.
Robert Smith of The Cure. More of our conversation coming up. For a man who sees The Cure as outsiders, they certainly have had their share of popular songs. I'll ask Robert about those hits, and yes, we will hear some live versions of them too, including the band's first hit in the U.S., Just Like Heaven, when we return to the World Cafe. We're returning to our interview with Robert Smith, lead singer of The Cure, and the live Cure performance at the Spectrum in Philadelphia this past May. The band has a new album called 413 Dream. The Cure have been enormously successful and long-lived, with 13 studio albums to their credit. Although they were not a band who relied on them, the band has had their share of hits, first in England and later here in the U.S. Friday I'm in Love was among the biggest. How did you feel about having hit singles when you had them? Did you? I mean, obviously it's nice to get accepted at that level, but it also brings a different kind of light into the band. I mean, people come to shows who know a couple songs.
Yeah, but when we started, Boys Don't Cry, that we ended with, I mean, it was in the last encore tonight. That was a second single. I mean, I wanted us to be a pop group when we started. I mean, I liked the Stranglers, I liked the Buzzcocks, those sort of those punk bands. Even the Sex Pistols, very tuneful band. People forget. I mean, that those songs have stood the test of time, not just because of Sid and the attitude and everything. They're actually really, really good melodies. They're songs. You can play them on piano. It's that kind of idea. Sitting down with a guitar, you can play those songs. I like the idea of us being a kind of a cross between Wire, who were one of those early punk bands, and I liked the Banshees at that time, and the Beatles, and Jimi Hendrix, and I was trying to put it all together and thinking but what I loved about all these people was like the melody and the drive that they had, and also they represented something other. And there's always those two things combined were what led me to want to be in a band that was like a pop group, but not a Duran Duran pop group. I didn't want to be on a yacht. I wanted to be under the water, kind of like attaching things to their boat kind of group. So it was. I mean, the fact that it worked. I mean, we went quite dark after that. I mean, I lost touch a little bit with my pop sensibility for a while, but for a couple of years I felt very unhappy with life in general, and when I came back from that and realised that things weren't quite as bad as I thought they were.
Well, it's interesting you talk about the dark periods, but I've also heard you say that albums like Pornography or Disintegration you feel in some ways are your finest work, and those are.
Well, I do and I don't really. Yeah. I mean, I think when I'm asked that kind of question, I think in the past I've said, well, if I want to be remembered by something, I would much rather be remembered by the big emotional songs than I'd rather be remembered for the title track of Disintegration than Love Cats, because I mean it's a kind of vanity thing though. I probably won't be. I think in 20 years' time, people will be singing Love Cats and clicking their fingers, and they won't. When we're out there and we're playing, Disintegration is we played it yesterday. It's a hugely powerful song. And like tonight, 100 years. It's that they connect with people, but they're not going to be remembered in the same way. I think that it's a weird group that I'm in. The legacy is a very odd thing. I don't think of it until I stop, and I probably will look back. I'm hoping that we're doing a 30th anniversary DVD, which is essentially like an autobiographical vanity project with Tim Pope, where I tell the story of like what The Cure is, what they did, and why. I don't think it hasn't changed the world, but there have been moments when we've led the way towards something slightly different, and I'm really proud of those moments, and that's what I want Tim to capture in the film.
I've heard you mention David Bowie as somebody early on that was influential on you on the idea of doing what you're doing, and I was thinking of his career, and I was thinking that one of the things he always did was kind of test the air, see what was going on, and actually try to move in where the zeitgeist was going. And what you just described is sort of the opposite of what you all were you aware of how music was moving and where you wanted to go, or did you just do your own
it's not name dropping, right? But I've actually argued about this with David Bowie, because he invited me to sing with him at his 50th birthday party at Madison Square Gardens, and I interviewed him for a radio station in a room much like this, and he'd said something about art that, in fact, that's come up again in a funny way, in a roundabout way, with Radiohead giving away their music on the internet for very different reasons, but essentially the same point, that the artist is given value by the consumer, which is essentially at the heart of Bowie's idea, is that like, you do something, and if it sticks, you're right, and if it doesn't, you're wrong. And I totally disagree with it. We didn't fall out. I was too drunk, actually. I was a terrible interviewer. I was going, "Hello, what do you really mean?" This is no, I don't know.
Did he understand what you were saying? Did he?
He did afterwards. Yeah. On air, he was very cagey and kind of like swatted me away like an annoying fly. But it was a year before his birthday party, and I thought, that's it. I thought, my one chance. I met him and I've upset him, and a year later he invited me over. So obviously he wasn't that upset. I think he was entertained by I think he saw it as a kind of naivety, but was I still think it's true. I don't think you can allow other people to value what you do, whatever it is, and certainly as an artist you can't. I spend my time, my efforts, creating something, and I value what I do. Whether anyone else does, it doesn't really matter to me. We're going back to that. That sounds really callous. It does matter, because there'll be no one here. I'm not making music in a dark room for only me to listen to. I want us to be the most popular band on the planet. I would love the new album to be number one around the world. Realistically, it probably isn't going to be. It should be, but time is the test of great art. Simple as that. If next year someone likes it, it's good.
Or if next year somebody likes what was 10 years ago.
I was actually saying 100 years if someone likes it, it's good.
Yeah. Robert Smith is our guest today on the World Cafe. And just a couple more questions, and these are... I'm watching people come in here, and there was not a single person in goth dress as I came in here. And it's funny, because you became kind of a poster child for something that you never embraced. And it's interesting that is actually seems like a thing in the past now. Do you feel that?
Well, I think it's mutated into something else. I think there's there's always that subcultural thing where you feel outside of the mainstream. Well, it's still there. It's just that we're not really. I don't know. We're perceived as that we're too old to be part of it. Really, I mean, we're too successful and too old. I'm aware of that, but I still think that. Having met a lot of the bands that are held up as the outsider bands, and like that subcultural thing is there, and huge actually. I mean, commercially huge in this country. unreal, like coming over here. But
you really think more so than in Europe or in England?
Certainly than in England, yeah. There are patches in Europe. I mean, it kind of cuts in two different ways. In Europe, there are more people dressed in black that are kind of going with the underground vibe at Cure concerts than there are in America. That's always been the case, though. I mean, we brought out Disintegration, and we played Giant Stadium. I mean, this wasn't 50,000 people dressed in black. There's 50,000 people in, like, Hawaiian shirts, and 5,000 people looking over their shoulders dressed in black, thinking, "What the fuck has just happened?" So I never minded, because I always thought, well, it was actually quite sort of weird playing to huge crowds, and still is. You feel like you're not subverting them. It's not that strong, but you're drawing people into. There are people out there who maybe would have never seen The Cure. They'll think, well, let's go and see what they're like. They know the singles, they know the hits, so they go on the strength of that. And then we play 100 years. They maybe 1 out of 10, 1 out of 100 people will stand and go, "Good Lord," and that's a good thing, I think. If no one thinks that, and they all go out thinking, like, "I really love Just Like Heaven, it was my favourite song tonight," that's equally as valid. I'm not trying to. That's the whole point. When I was younger, I was going into places like this, and I was thinking, like, right. We either win or we lose. Whereas now, I don't have that kind of. I have the same intensity about what we're doing, but I don't worry about the result, kind of thing. I think that to try and be part of that movement, and then think, oh, where have they all gone? Where have all the goths gone? It's like you say, we didn't embrace it in the first place. It was never part of what we did. I mean, we used to have people moan at us terribly, like, why are you doing this thing? Like, Friday My Love came out in 1992, and it's like, oh my God, what are you doing? But I would always say, well, we did Boys Don't Cry. That's always been my, has been my rallying cry to the goth crowd. It's like, it doesn't devalue the emotional side of the band doing pop songs. It really doesn't. It's like, I've listened to, I was looking through my favourite videos of 1980. I did this thing for MTV a couple of weeks ago, and I was thinking Chaka Khan was actually my favourite video of the 80s, and it's like, that doesn't really sit very well with being a goth icon, so I think I've been misplaced in some way.
Indeed. One of the things I noted about the show today, you've been playing, as you mentioned, you've been playing stadiums, giant arenas forever. And yet I found this show to be really intimate. And it's because you don't make the big gesture necessarily.
I actually feel happier than I've ever felt on stage in my whole life. When I was young, I never performed. I was never in a school play. I was always like doing wardrobe. I hated the idea of getting on stage. Until I first sang when I was 17, and I very reluctantly sang a David Bowie cover song at our first show, and I was bitten by the idea of like singing to people. My dad's a really good singer, and so I thought, well, if he's good, then it's like probably genetic. So I went with it. But I've never been a natural performer. But on this tour, like we started like last fall in Australia, Japan, I felt so comfortable with the other three that when we walk on stage, I feel like we're playing in a very small room. It's a weird feeling, but it was there tonight. I mean, I'm not playing to the back of the crowd. I'm actually playing to like the front row or the middle or like whoever. I'm playing to those people who are like watching.
Robert Smith of The Cure, and again, my thanks to Robert for spending time with us.